Late autumn found Mr. Nakamura walking through his orchard, where branches stripped of leaves stood against a clear blue sky. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen fruit and wet earth, reminders that winter was near. He moved slowly with a cane, stopping often to rest on an old wooden bench set beneath a sturdy apple tree. Beside him lay a small garden shed filled with his tools, scissors, pruning shears, an assortment of ties and nets for the coming spring. Today he carried only one tool, a single worn spade. He needed it not so much to dig as to help him lean against something solid when fatigue overcame him. A rustling sound caught Mr. Nakamura's attention. From the edge of his orchard stepped a young woman, her clothes stained with mud and leaves. She carried an old knapsack slung across one shoulder. He watched her closely but remained silent, waiting to see if she needed something or was simply passing through. The woman approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said softly. Her voice trembled slightly. Mr. Nakamura looked at her kindly and gestured for her to sit beside him on the bench. She did so carefully, as though afraid of disturbing the calmness of his orchard. "I'm lost," she admitted after a moment's silence. "I was hiking nearby and got turned around." She glanced at the old man, wondering if he could help or merely dismiss her concerns. But Mr. Nakamura didn't speak. Instead, he looked out over the rows of trees, silent but attentive. The young woman fidgeted with her knapsack, then pulled out a map and spread it across her lap. She began to trace lines on the paper as though trying to understand where she was and how to find her way back. Mr. Nakamura watched her for a while longer before reaching into his own bag at his feet. From within he took an old pocket watch wound tight, its face marked with scratches but still ticking faithfully away. He held it out to the woman without speaking, his hands steady despite their age. She looked up at him questioningly and then accepted the timepiece. She unfolded her map again and compared it to the directions indicated on the watch. After a few moments of studying both, she seemed to find what she needed because her eyes lit with sudden hope. "Thank you," she said quietly, offering the watch back. Mr. Nakamura shook his head gently, placing a hand on hers where she held the timepiece. He opened the lid once more and let her see that it was simply a clock but also an instrument of precision, marking not just hours but moments in her life now too. She understood without words, smiled gratefully at him, and carefully slipped the watch into her knapsack beside other belongings she would need on her journey. As she stood to leave, Mr. Nakamura pointed towards a path winding through his orchard that led directly back to town. "Follow it," he said simply. She nodded once more, turning to thank him again before stepping onto the trail and disappearing into the trees. Mr. Nakamura watched until he could no longer see her figure moving between the trunks of fruit-bearing branches. Then he leaned against his spade, feeling its familiar weight support him as autumn wind began to whisper through the barren limbs above. He listened intently to those soft sounds, breathing deeply of cold air mixed with earth and fallen leaves.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. The wind carried away the last trace of her scent as it swept through the orchard. In the late afternoon light, Yuki wiped her hands on her apron, stepping out into an old man's path with a worn wooden box.
In the late afternoon light, Yuki wiped her hands on her apron as she stepped out of the herbalist's back room where she had been sorting herbs and remedies. The door creaked softly behind her, opening to reveal an old man with a single cane and a worn wooden box in his hand. He was wearing dark glasses over one eye, which he kept squinted against the sun. "Can I help you?" Yuki asked politely. The man nodded, adjusting his glasses. "I'm looking for something to ease my joints," he said slowly, holding up his hands which were swollen and cracked from years of hard labor. Yuki led him inside where the walls were lined with jars filled with leaves and roots, each one labeled carefully. The herbalist, an elderly woman named Saya, sat on a stool near her collection of herbs, her eyes moving quickly across them before settling on Yuki and the visitor. "Ah, Masahiro," she said quietly, nodding to him. "I have just the thing." She began to dig through one of the larger jars while Masahiro watched with interest, his hand still resting gently on his wooden box. Yuki stepped closer, reading over Saya's shoulder as they picked out a small bag filled with a deep purple powder. "Will this do?" asked Saya, lifting her gaze from the jar to look at Masahiro, who nodded again. "Take care when you use it," she said firmly but gently. "It's very powerful." Yuki handed him the package and he bowed his head slightly before stepping back out into the dim light of the room. As he did so, a sudden gust of wind made the wooden box rattle against Masahiro's side. Outside, the herbalist's garden was in full autumn bloom, with golden leaves swirling down from the trees to coat paths and beds. The air smelled richly of fallen fruit and old earth. Yuki closed the door behind her, noticing how Masahiro had paused by a small rock outcropping near the garden's edge. "Do you need some help carrying that?" she offered, indicating his wooden box with a tilt of her head. Masahiro shook his head without looking at her. "I can manage," he said softly but with determination. Still, Yuki could see the slight strain on his face as he held it up to balance under one arm. "Would you like me to walk with you for a bit?" she asked again, seeing that he seemed to need some support. The old man hesitated briefly before nodding slightly. "If you don't mind," he said quietly. They walked in silence down the path toward the gate at the edge of the forest. Yuki noticed how the leaves crunched beneath their feet and the way Masahiro's hand occasionally fluttered near his box as if to make sure it was still there. When they reached the gate, Masahiro paused, looking back over his shoulder towards the herbalist's house that now seemed so close and yet far away. He lifted a single finger in farewell before turning again and heading down the path into the woods. Yuki watched him for a moment, her breath catching slightly as he disappeared from sight. Then she turned back toward the garden, noticing how the light was fading quickly with the setting sun. As she moved through the paths among the rustling leaves, the sound of a gentle breeze made its way to her ears, the faint whisper of wind moving softly over the autumn fields.
The path wound on, leaves whispering secrets to the evening breeze. Above a sleepy town nestled against green hills lay an orchard where autumn had begun painting its shades of amber and gold.
Above a sleepy town nestled against the green hills lay an orchard where autumn had begun to paint its shades of amber and gold. Here, under a fading canopy of apple trees, stood two figures: Maria, a woman with eyes that held stories older than her age, and little Sophia, who carried a small basket much too large for her petite frame. Maria found herself drawn back to this orchard year after year, as if it were a place where time lingered in the leaves. On one such morning, she noticed Sophia struggling under the weight of her oversized burden. Without hesitation, Maria stepped forward and offered her help. "Let me carry that for you," she said gently. Sophia looked up at Maria with wide eyes, surprised by this unexpected kindness from a stranger. She handed over the basket, which seemed to release a portion of its mystery when it left her grasp. Maria set the basket down beside them and asked quietly, "Why are you out here so early?" Sophia hesitated before answering, "My grandmother sends me to gather apples for tea each day." Maria nodded, understanding the routine without needing to know more. She picked up the basket once again and began to pick some of the ripest fruits, placing them carefully inside. As they worked side by side in comfortable silence, Sophia's cheeks reddened slightly with her labor, but there was a newfound lightness in her step. Maria continued to select apples, occasionally handing one to Sophia to place into the basket herself. The task had become less burdensome when shared. After gathering more than enough for their needs, Maria paused and looked at the full basket thoughtfully. "Would you like to know how I learned about the best apples?" she asked Sophia without waiting for a reply. Sophia tilted her head slightly, curiosity shining in her gaze as Maria began to explain. Not with big words but through the simple act of pointing out subtle differences between each apple's shape and color and feeling its weight. Each one seemed to tell a story of its own growth under this particular sky. The morning wore on, and soon they were surrounded by an abundance that would nourish many cups of tea. Maria suggested it was time to return, and Sophia nodded eagerly but with lingering reluctance. She clutched her hands together, as if remembering something important. "May I come back tomorrow?" she asked timidly. Maria smiled warmly, seeing in this child's eyes the echo of a memory that had once been hers too, one of discovery and companionship under the watchful eye of nature's quiet wisdom. "Of course," Maria said softly, "and bring your basket again." As they walked back down to the town together, Sophia's steps were lighter still. The air around them was filled with a soft rustle of fallen leaves crunching beneath their boots and the distant call of birds settling in for another day. Maria watched as Sophia reached her grandmother's home and placed the full basket on the doorstep quietly before turning back to wave goodbye shyly over her shoulder. Maria returned her smile, lifting one hand slightly in farewell, a gesture small but rich with meaning. The sound of the closing door marked an end to their morning's work, leaving behind only the scent of ripening fruit and the promise of tomorrow's sunlit journey through this familiar orchard.
The door closed with a soft click, and the orchard fell silent once more. In the cool light of early dawn, under a single persimmon tree in a quiet courtyard, Li Wei sat at an old wooden bench.
In the cool light of early dawn, under a single persimmon tree in a quiet courtyard, Li Wei sat at an old wooden bench. He had been there since before the first stirrings of daybreak, watching as the sky transformed from ink-black to gray and then to hues of blue and orange. The leaves on the persimmon tree hung heavy with fruit. A gentle knock startled him. Turning, he saw a figure in the doorway, Zhang Mei, a beekeeper who often passed through this part of town during her rounds. She held an old wooden hive frame under one arm, her eyes fixed on Li Wei's face for a moment before she moved towards him. "Good morning," she said, placing the hive frame on the ground beside the bench. "I saw your light and thought I'd come to see if you needed anything." Li Wei nodded and offered her a place at the bench. Together they sat in comfortable silence until Mei spoke again. "It's hard work, isn't it?" "Sometimes," Li Wei replied, not looking away from the fruit hanging low on the tree. Mei leaned forward, pulling one of the persimmons off its stem and offering it to him without a word. They both unwrapped their sweaters, revealing crisp white undershirts underneath. The morning air was cool but no longer cold. Li Wei took the fruit with thanks and ate it slowly, his movements deliberate. After a while, Mei began to inspect her hive frame, running her fingers along the grooves where bees had nested for years. "I wonder how many generations of these bees have lived here," she mused softly. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something delicate and fragile. Li Wei watched her hands move, then glanced up to find her eyes meeting his. They both smiled, understanding passing between them without needing words. Mei returned her attention to the hive frame, but this time she brought it close to Li Wei's bench so they could see it better together. For a moment, nothing else mattered, not the tasks awaiting them in their daily lives, nor the thoughts swirling around inside their heads. Only this, two people sitting side by side under an old persimmon tree as light filtered through leaves and ripened fruit began to fall from branches. After several minutes of quiet companionship, Mei rose slowly, gathering her hive frame back into her arms. "I should be going now," she said, but there was no urgency in her voice, only a quiet acceptance of what needed to be done next. Li Wei nodded and reached for his own sweater, slipping it on before standing up too. There was something unspoken between them, something they both felt but would never talk about. As May walked away, Li Wei watched until she disappeared behind the doorframe. Then he returned to his quiet contemplation of the persimmon tree, its ripe fruit now scattered on the ground where she had stood. The courtyard filled with a soft rustle as leaves stirred in the morning breeze. And then there was only stillness again, broken by the distant sound of a rooster crowing from somewhere nearby.
A single persimmon fell from the tree, landing softly on the quiet earth below. On a fishing dock shrouded in early morning fog, the silhouette of an old man sat motionless on a rickety stool.
On a fishing dock shrouded in early morning fog, the silhouette of an old man sat motionless on a rickety stool. Beside him, a line dangled into the water without any baited hooks, moving slightly with the current's whisper. The air was cool and damp against his skin as he waited. Not far away, a young woman approached the dock, her footsteps slow and deliberate over wooden planks slick from mist. She carried nothing but a small bag clutched loosely in one hand, her expression neutral yet curious. She paused for a moment before walking towards him. "Mind if I sit?" she asked softly, indicating the space beside him with her eyes. The old man nodded without turning his head, and she settled onto the stool. They sat quietly side by side, staring out at the misty expanse of water that stretched beyond their view. For a while, neither spoke. They simply breathed together in rhythm with the fogged air. The woman's presence was unobtrusive, her gaze drifting over the gray surface where small ripples moved almost imperceptibly under the blanket of cloud cover. Eventually, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather-bound notebook. Opening it to an empty page, she took a pencil from the side pocket and began writing in meticulous strokes. Her back was straight, her focus intense. The old man glanced at her once, but quickly looked away again, returning his attention to the water ahead of them. His hands were folded neatly over each other on top of the rail beside him, occasionally twitching as if he wanted to fish but couldn't bring himself to do so. As time passed, she wrote steadily while he remained motionless. After some minutes had elapsed, he finally spoke. "Fish don't always bite." She nodded slightly, acknowledging his words without lifting her eyes from the page. "I know," she replied softly, though whether she meant fish or something else was unclear. They fell back into silence. The sound of a distant gull crying in the fog filled the space between them. She closed the notebook and placed it carefully beside her on the bench. Then, without another word, she stood up. "Thank you," she murmured to him as she stepped off the dock and disappeared down the path leading back into town. The old man waited until the crunch of footsteps faded away before sighing deeply. He reached out with one gnarled hand and gently picked up his line, attaching a few small hooks baited simply but effectively for whatever might come their way next. Setting the reel in place, he then straightened his back, pushing himself up from the stool. With deliberate steps, he walked down towards where she had gone, the cool morning air refreshing against him as it washed over him once more before disappearing beyond reach. The dock emptied of them both, returning to its tranquil solitude under the lingering fog.
The fog seemed to swallow the last traces of their conversation as it rolled in thicker around the empty dock. Silence lingered, a reminder of quiet mornings and evenings past. We close the door now. Until tomorrow.